Please welcome to the stage Hala Hanna, Executive Director, MIT Solve.
Hi. What an amazing day so far. It's amazing to hear how much progress the solvers have made since the selection in September. And the real moment of magic is actually in the serendipity, these little human connections when it works and it sparks. I think human connection is actually at the heart of so much of what we do. So let's smoothly transition to a plenary about artificial connection. We're going to talk about AI. Today's AI models offer stunning capabilities at very low efforts for users, with implications we haven't begun to understand. These models are built on a messy history of moving too fast, making things up with undue confidence, and operating in legal gray areas. Seriously, who wants to piss off Scarlett Johansson? These models are also trained with data that only represents a tiny portion of the world. It's like the world is being narrated by far too few people. It also means it only reflects where we have been and not necessarily where we want to go. At Solve, we are asking, how do we use AI systems to help us build a more stable, fair, delightful world? And more specifically, how do we use AI to build a more equitable approach to philanthropy and to tackling global challenges? And we see AI's promise in our solvers, like Michael Runningwolf, who became an AI researcher to carry indigenous languages into the world of automation speech recognition. And his work started with data research and grew to become the Wakashan AI Consortium, bringing together communities across the globe to build this data set and the systems behind it. It's such a beautiful way to use modern technology to reclaim traditional knowledge. And our supporters are also bent on wielding AI for social good. Shout out to Michele Malejki from HP, and to Liz McGovern and the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation for their long-running support and AI-related prizes, which you'll hear about in a moment. Speaking of prizes, I get to announce another AI-focused prize on behalf of the Morgridge Family Foundation. MFF invests in leaders and organizations reimagining solutions to some of today's biggest challenges. This year's AI Innovation Prize is available to solutions that use AI to boldly spark change through innovation, disruption, and transformation. Up to $50,000 would be granted to one or two solver teams across Solve's portfolio. And the prize winners will also be announced at Solve Challenge Finals in September during Climate Week. Thank you to John and Carrie Morgridge and the whole MFF team. Okay, let's get into our plenary. Today's speakers are here to help us understand what AI means for the world, and especially those underestimated by the current system. Have fun.
And now, please welcome Seth Dobrin, CEO, Quantum AI, and founder and general partner, One Infinity Ventures, and moderator, Nayeema Raza, journalist and host of the podcast, Mixed Signals.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
This session is called Humans at the Center. But lately it seems like it's technology at the center of everything. And to the extent that there are humans at the center, it's like, what humans, right? Which humans? So I'm very excited. So let's start with you, what human, because you used to be, or you were leading AI efforts at IBM.
Yep.
So what does that look like? Are you best friends with Watson?
Yeah, best friends with Watson. So at IBM, I was responsible for AI across the whole company.
Mm-hmm.
So strategy from research to consulting to software and governance and ethics across the whole company. So defining what that meant, and really starting to drive some of the efforts in IBM around what the basis is for what we think about as they're called foundation models, which is what underlies things like ChatGPT.
Right.
And so really driving some of what this technology is, starting all the way back in 2017, that we see today. And so really getting into how do we use this technology, how do we develop this technology, and things like that,
Right.
and how do we, to the point about the topic here, how do we make sure that humans are core to that which involves a few things. It's number one, making sure the data is secured in
yeah.
a way that is respectful of humans.
Of course. I want to get into the other two things too, but before we get like some news that's happening right now, because it seems that we're either in an epicenter of it or in a kind of deja vu period where OpenAI, obviously the leading company in the space right now, has just seen yet another employee depart today, Gretchen Kruger. So this is following the departures of John Leek and Ilya Sutskever, sorry. And this has been a debate that's been playing out for a while now, a couple years now, really since ChatGPT came out, but also since November of last year in the press, at least watching the kind of football of Sam Altman's job and the kind of fight between the Excel and Decel movement. So explain where we are, how you look at that. How do you look at what's happening there, and what does it tell you about how safety is or isn't going to be valued in this next phase of?
Yeah, I think the conversation actually goes back a year further. I think the conversation actually goes back to November of 2022 when the technology was originally released to the public. And so if you look at November 2022, up until the moment that ChatGPT was released to where your grandmother or your children could use it, there was this rigorous application process that you had to go through to get access to it, including what you were going to do to make sure that the technology was used safely. And it took weeks to get approved, and it was this long process. And you had to explain how you were going to mitigate some of the challenges that were known.
Right.
Sam Altman and his team knew there were problems with it. So back in November 2022 was probably what I think and others think was one of the most irresponsible decisions in technology ever was made by releasing ChatGPT, so people who have no idea about the problems and no idea how to control them were getting access to the technology.
Right. So, I mean, I hear you on that. I think the other side of that, someone would say, well, the technology existed, and it was only a matter of time before somebody released it. So both for the fact that OpenAI had at that point gone from being a nonprofit entity to having this for-profit configuration, and just competition, right? That's what everybody will tell you. Oh, the Chinese will get there first.
So I think there were at least 7 companies that had the technology. So there was OpenAI, there was IBM, there was Microsoft, there was Google, there was a company called AI21 Labs, and there was Anthropic, or at least 6 companies. And so there were at least those 6 companies that had it. Google, Microsoft, IBM could not release it. They're public companies. There were too much risk. And so it was really OpenAI, Anthropic, or AI21 that was going to do it first. But I think there were ways that it could have been done more appropriately, where you weren't going to release it in a chat bot necessarily that anyone could have done it. So I think there are ways.
What do we do now, though? I agree with you. I don't disagree with you, I should say, that there were ways that it could have been done better. That's certainly the case. But now we are where we are. And it seems like it's an inflection point where the big companies are now, salivating to be in this experience.
So I agree 100%. The cat's out of the bag. But the question was, getting to where we are, how did we get here today with kind of safeties kind of thrown to the wind? And so I think safety got thrown to the wind November 2022 when they released it. When Sam Altman and his team decided to release it, and we started seeing indications that was happening. So, he went in front of Congress about 6 months later, and the EU, and said we need regulation. Okay, well, you should have talked about that in November before you released it. A little bit disingenuous. And so, okay, then you come 6 months later. There were some issues going on behind the scenes that we are not privy to, where. That something was going on where the board didn't think
they were concerned about his commercial interests or the pace of investment. We are still not. The reporting will continue to come out. I think it will come out faster.
I think it'll come out faster now that there's some anonymous sources that may surface that have probably inside knowledge.
But where do we go from here? Like, what does this tell you about where development is going? Because I think the history is interesting, but more interesting is what does it mean that they're kind of that these individuals are choosing to leave? How does this human exodus?
So there's human exodus, and the human exodus, I think, and I don't know any of these people personally, so I don't have any inside scoop. So so there's people leaving, and there's news that the teams that they were serving on are getting outside of Ilya. There's the safety teams are getting disbanded.
Right.
And so that's an issue moving forward. And so I think there's 2 ways that they could be approaching this, and I hope what's happening is these safety teams are actually getting embedded into the other teams, and it's not just being thrown by the wayside. And so if you look at what's happening at Anthropic, the way Anthropic works is that the safety is actually, they have what's called constitutional AI, where safety is actually embedded in how the models are trained.
Right.
And so everything that happens in Anthropic is done with their constitutional AI. So everything that's trained is trained with guardrails.
Right.
And so hopefully, OpenAI is doing something like this. They haven't given any indication.
Right.
But that's, in my mind, that's the direction that the industry should go. And the other direction is the industry should start moving away, in my mind, from these massive, I don't think they will, but from in these massive general purpose models, because that's not what the technology was designed for in the first place. That's what caused the problems. It's not what the technology was designed for. And really, it's a toy. That's not what the value is for, for companies, even for individuals. It's small, more focused models that are actually developed to solve a problem.
Right. So you just launched a safety AI fund.
Correct.
How much money is in it?
$500 million.
$500 million. And would you have invested in OpenAI or Anthropic? It sounds like you would have chosen Anthropic.
I would have chosen Anthropic.
And what will you be looking for in this, kind of the founders or the founding teams or the commitments? Give us 3 kind of key indicators to look for?
Yeah, so we're looking
investors.
for responsible, safe, and green AI.
Okay.
And so we're looking for companies that focus on, well, diverse teams are important, both geographically and individually.
Okay, so
not
4 things, yeah.
Well, geographically and diverse, that's diverse. So diverse teams. We're looking for founders who really believe it. So it's not just something they're saying and really believe it. And we're looking for, in my mind, those things create a defensible position, right? So one thing that's concerning in this space is it's advancing so fast, and so what's your moat, right? What's your defensible position? In our mind, myself and my partners, we believe that this responsible, safe, or green is the defensible position.
Right.
And so those are the things we're looking for.
And are you finding a lot of that? Is
So-
there a pipeline problem?
So we haven't even closed our fund yet, and we have $300 million worth of pipeline.
Okay. It strikes me that I asked you before if you would invest in OpenAI, but back when OpenAI was beginning, it was a very different type of company. And so it begs the question of, will the DNA of the large language models and the artificial intelligence and the use cases, is that intrinsically tied to the DNA of the people making it? Or, is there a smarter way to build in commitments for investors, to build in commitments?
Yeah, so I think investors need to be more engaged in the companies they invest in. And so that is our plan. So we're doing very early, so concept all the way through Series C. So we plan on being engaged, very engaged in those stages. And so that's one way to do it. And we're technical experts, so that's the difference, is we understand the technology. And so I think investors need to understand what they're investing in. So that's a big gap with this technology, is there's probably 3 investment firms that understand this technology.
Who are they?
Ourselves, Sequoia has people that do it, and I'm guessing there's at least one other.
Okay. Well, you biased on one of those.
Yeah, I'm
but
biased.
So that's a compliment to
yeah.
Sequoia. But I want to kind of close with this idea that you've talked about. Well, I'm curious, how many people in the audience use ChatGPT or some AI function? All of them. Okay. And how many of you use it every day? Okay. That's probably, is that what you see in your clients that you speak to? Because you also advise. I imagine that's not the configuration.
That's not the configuration, no.
So do you think there's a bunch of people who just don't understand this world, and there'll be a lot of, I would assume, what I'm going to call dumb investors coming into this space in the way that...
Yeah, and I teach at NYU and at one of the city university in New York at Baruch at the master's school, and actually about half the master's students never used it either, surprisingly.
It is. I feel like it's really going to be generational, and it's so interesting because we're at this moment right now where it seems like these startup companies, if you can call an $80 billion company a startup, but the OpenAIs in the world, they're really getting into these thorny issues. They're fighting with Scarlett Johansson. They're negotiating these deals with Rupert Murdoch. They're, seeing their boardroom dramas and their corporate dramas move out and employee, consternation. And you see companies like Google, Microsoft, moving forward through strategic investments, through hardware, Meta, that's like embedded in your applications at this point. So it strikes me as like we're gonna either at the end of this next phase see one of those two models work out. The kind of, or like the big companies are gonna swoop in, or the smaller companies you're gonna see a rise of kind of Anthropics and others that come up. Who do you think is gonna control the future?
So I think there's this challenge. So I think all these companies are too big, and so I think if you look back to when Amazon started, right? These companies are all too big. That was the problem with cloud. Microsoft, IBM, were all too big. That's why Google and Amazon came up. I think we're going to see something similar where all these companies are too big. You're going to see some startup, some company that's in concept or pre-seed or seed, that's going to come in and take over this whole space, and that's going to be the Amazon of 5 years from now.
Maybe you'll invest in it.
I hope so.
That would be a thing. All right.
Maybe it'll come out of Solve.
Yeah, great. Maybe you'll be one of you guys. Thank you so much.
And now, please welcome Pattie Maes, Professor, Media Arts and Sciences, MIT Media Lab.
Good afternoon, everyone. 35 years ago, I finished my PhD in artificial intelligence back when I could still know everybody in the field when I went to the conferences. And I quickly moved to MIT, what was then called the AI Lab, because that was, of course, then and still now the place to be if you wanted to be at the center of all of these AI developments. But I quickly became a little bit disillusioned by this goal that AI researchers have. That was really the goal put forward by the originator of the idea of AI, namely Alan Turing. The goal of AI back then and still now is primarily to match or surpass human intelligence and people in performance. And the vision of a lot of these AI developers, OpenAI, etc., is that AI basically will take our jobs so that we can go play golf, do art, music, etc. And they believe that that is actually a better world than one where we focus on people and augment people instead of building machines that can surpass us. So I moved after a couple of years of being a postdoc at the AI Lab to the Media Lab at MIT still as a professor, to focus on this alternate vision of intelligence augmentation, where we try to use the same technologies, the same machine learning technologies, to support human performance and to help people become smarter, better, healthier, etc., happier. I'm especially interested in using all of these technologies to support critical human skills that a lot of people may struggle with, and that prevent a lot of people from really being basically at their optimal performance. Things like memory, critical thinking, motivation, behavior change, effective communication, and more. So I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview of the types of things that I've been working on at MIT for the last many decades. A lot of our focus is on memory augmentation. For example, as you'll see in this video. So Memoro is basically a wearable AI system that augments your memory by acting as your personal ChatGPT that literally is trained on what it hears and that can help you remember any facts in the moment. We're especially interested in the aging population.
I'm an investment banker from Trade Investments.
Oh, and what do you do there?
So we invest in biotech startups that help with rare diseases, but you should reach out if you're interested.
Thank you, I will. Oh wait, what was his name again?
Robert.
Hello. Hi, Grandpa. So once you're done with your walking, can you please get a dozen of eggs and a packet of bread and about 6 bananas, please?
Okay. I have taken bread and eggs. I don't know the third thing I have forgotten.
Bananas.
Hey, building a biotech startup. Do you know where I can look for investment? Oh yes, actually just met this guy last week. His name is Robert, and he works in fluid investments, and they specialize in
Rare diseases.
biotech startups, working in rare diseases actually.
So you get the idea. There's obviously privacy issues, which I can't talk about here today, but which we think about very much. But we have been especially interested in how memory augmentation devices like this can help the aging population live in their own homes safely and independently for more years. So we've been building systems like this MemPal system, which takes pictures all day long when you wear it in your home of whatever you are doing with your hands. And we use multimodal AI models to analyze what the person is doing. They're opening the fridge at this time, so they must be making breakfast, etc. The system does not keep the images, it just analyzes them, produces this diary, but then that diary can be used in all sorts of ways. For example, here we see the person asking their MemPal where they may have left their phone.
Hi, pal, where is my phone?
And so she hears that whispered in her ears, basically. The system noticed where she last had her phone in her hands, where she put it down, etc. We've been working closely with older adults, like the one you saw in the video, bringing them to MIT to co-design solutions based on what they find their most important needs to be. So this system actually doesn't just help the older adult with helping find objects, reminding them to turn the stove off when they've turned it on earlier, or to lock the door at night. The caregivers are also helped. The caregivers actually, their burden is reduced because they can get little summaries sent by the AI system if they have permission, of course, from the older adult. Summaries that say your mother had 3 meals and went out and this and that, and she's been getting some exercise and so on. Doctors can potentially also get access to some of this data, etc. All of this is possible now with AI models. We're also looking at how AI can help maybe younger people learn how to think critically. All of us are increasingly bombarded by information that is trying to persuade us and that is maybe not logically valid or truthful. So we have been building systems that actually either can listen to what you hear or can also read what you are looking at on the screen. And in real time, these systems give you advice whether something is true or false, and the system can also explain why. And we've been using natural language explanations and showed that people can improve their discernment of factual information when they have these agents that in real time give them advice. But then we did another experiment. We thought, well, what if the agent is malicious and actually tries to convince you of the opposite of what is actually true? And unfortunately, we learned that when people have this access to AI decision-making at their fingertips, they ultimately end up thinking less for themselves. So in gray, you see how well a person can discern between true and false newspaper headlines when they are not assisted by an AI. In blue, you see how well they do for true and false headlines with a good AI that gives you correct advice. But in red is how well people perform if they are assisted by a malicious AI. And you can see that basically their performance is almost halved compared to being without an AI. So we have to be very careful, because people assisted by AI, and we are not the only ones to find this, ultimately start becoming a little bit lazy potentially and losing certain skills because they start overly relying on these very persuasive systems. So we are working on techniques like new interfaces where the AI engages the user in thinking about the problem first before saying, this is true because, and this is false because, so that the person actually thinks for themselves. And we show that even AI doesn't just give you the answer right away with an explanation, but instead engages you with some Q&A that people actually perform a lot better. We've also been looking, and this was work that we were doing back when all the kids were learning from home during the pandemic. We've been looking at whether AI could actually help motivate people. For example, could it help motivate them to learn? And back in 2020, Elon Musk, who you probably recognize there on the left, was still more liked by more people. So we thought we would pick someone, a public figure who some people loved and admired, other people not as much. And we wanted to see if we have this deep fake of Elon Musk. We told people, by the way, this is a deep fake. It's not a real Elon Musk. So we created this deep fake, told them it was a deep fake, and we had Elon Musk and then this non-existing character teach a lesson, just like we were all, or the kids were all learning during COVID. The lesson was about vaccines, by the way. The soundtrack was the exact same for this non-existing deepfake and for deepfake Elon Musk. And what we learned is that depending on whether people admired Elon Musk, they wanted to learn more about the topic. They thought the instructor was a great instructor, etc. It made a significant statistical difference, basically, in all the outcomes, in that people were much more motivated to learn, etc., if they actually had Elon Musk and they liked Elon Musk. So there's a lot of interesting research that can be done in sort of the subtleties of how people react emotionally, psychologically, socially to these systems that really speak our language, basically, and seem very human-like. We've also been looking at, can AI help motivate behavior change? This is actually one of the toughest problems out there. Can we help people change their behavior for the better? And we've been working with some psychologists, Hal Hirschfield from UCLA, looking at future continuity is sort of the technical name of the area. As you all know, when a certain decision has consequences in the future, we tend to not sort of think as much about these consequences, like maybe all of you went for cookies in the break today, and you don't immediately feel the weight or the increased in blood pressure or whatever. It comes 30 years later. So people often have trouble sort of changing their behavior for more sustainable behavior when there is this sort of discontinuity between taking the action and when the effects, the negative effects occur. Of course, that's very much the case for global warming as well. So we thought, can we actually use AI to help people think more or be more future-oriented? And we built this system that where you can upload a picture of yourself and you can tell the system what your goals are, what your life is like. You answer a couple of questions, and then the system creates an older version of you, not just a picture, but also a chatbot that you can talk to about what your future might be like if you do X, Y, and Z. So, for example, in this case, the young lady said, I think I want to become a biology teacher in an inner city. I want to have a family, a couple of kids, etc. And she can talk to a simulated future self about what it's like to be a biology teacher. What are the good things and the bad things, etc. How is her financial situation, etc. And all of that really helps make that future more tangible. And what we showed together with Hal Hirschfield is that this changes people's behavior, basically. They become more future-oriented because that future has become more real to them. We're also doing things like helping people with difficult communications using AI. We have a system where you can create a conversation partner and model them after, say, your boss or your parents or a colleague that you disagree with. You give the system some information about the other person, and it simulates that person and how they would respond to you given a particular difficult conversation, whether it's a conversation about getting a raise or a certain decision that you agree on, disagree on, etc. So you can rehearse your conversations in advance with AI models to then better perform in the actual conversation. We've been using this, for example, to help LGBTQ young people come out to their parents, and just published a paper about that. So I would argue that, as we heard in the previous panel as well, AI is here to stay, but I hope that I'm convincing a couple of you solvers to not sort of work towards this vision of AI that surpasses and replaces us, but rather put people at the center and design for augmentation to really help support people, especially the most vulnerable, in ultimately becoming the person that they would like to be. Thank you.
Please welcome AboDraiaa, CEO, Rology. Gatanjali Rao, UNICEF Youth Advocate, Young Innovator, and Founder, Vervient Foundation. And moderator, Michele Malejki, Global Head of Social Impact, HP.
Amazing. Well, we are here for a short but very sweet panel today, and we're very excited to just dive right into it. So with that, I'd love to just start already with you, Amar, if I can. You have an amazing amount of work going on at Rology, providing telemedicine services and thinking about x-rays, other radiology and solutions. And so I wonder if you could just start by telling us, what does that look like in practice? And what is the role of AI, especially following that amazing presentation, in your work and making it work?
Yeah, thank you, Sheila, for the invitation. Thank you, Solve, also for the opportunity. And yeah, I mean, great applause for all solvers here. So we, in Rology, we solve the problem of the severe shortage and the misutilization of radiologists. So can you imagine in Africa in general, there is only one radiologist for every 2 million citizens, which is create a huge gap for diagnostic services overall. So we build a zero setup costed platform, which is literally affordable and available for every single hospital, wherever this hospital is, to integrate the radiology machines with our platform and to have the final diagnostic report in something like 30 minutes without any kind of infrastructure or integrations or something like this.
Amazing. And I mean, that statistic is so powerful in terms of the number of people that need to be reached and that now can be, thanks to what you're working on. Can you also just elaborate a little about what brought you into this work?
Yeah, actually, during my last startup, I have been in the health tech since 2006. And then I used to do hospital information system and hospital medical electronic record and so on and so forth. So we figured out that diagnostics in general is a cornerstone for every single hospital. And there is a huge problem when it comes to diagnostic, when it comes to lab tests and radiology and so on and so forth. So we start to figure out how we can solve such a problem for all of the radiology departments in general.
Amazing, thank you. And Gatanjali, who I've learned is a Time Kid of the Year a few years ago, and I'm so excited. My team won Social Impact Team of the Year, so we had some commonalities there. But let's talk about the 10,000 different things that you are doing. And among many projects, you've actually recently established Kindly.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to us a little bit about that and how did that come out?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Usually on that side of the stage, so this is really exciting for me. But again, an honor to be here among both of you as well. Like, such inspiring people with such incredible missions. I think first and foremost, it's very important to address this huge issue of digital cyberbullying, mainly because it can take so many different forms in today's day and age. And a lot of times it happens without any real reason, which makes it even scarier. Recognizing that problem, and also on top of that, facing a lot of those challenges very early on, I would say in my childhood, but I'm in fact 18. But facing those challenges, I think a big thing that I recognized is there needed to be some sort of solution, and we need to build upon existing solutions to be able to address this widespread issue of cyberbullying, especially when you're hiding behind a screen. So my whole concept was I wanted to develop a tool called Kindly, which started out as a prototype, but is now a UNICEF digital public good, which I'm very, very excited about, as an anti-cyberbullying solution, and it's the first one using artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning, which is a very broad term as well, but even more specifically, natural language processing and understanding. And the goal is it's built on this self-learning algorithm. So it's always updated on the latest slangs, trends, memes, emojis, everything that's out there today. And the really, really cool part about it is that on the Kindly landing page, anyone can go in and contribute their own words and phrases in response to prompts to train the engine. And I think today we have about 700 inputs through UNICEF, outside of UNICEF as well. And a cool thing about Kindly, and I think my favorite part about it, is it's built as an API, which means it can be invoked onto a variety of different front ends. Today it's available on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and G Suite, Discord, Slack, and in the next couple of years will be on other social media that we know and love, TikTok. But,
amazing.
But yeah, that's a little bit about Kindly.
Amazing. And so this is a call to action as well for those in the room,
Yes,
those watching, right?
do.
To engage with Kindly, go in and leave comments. As you're saying, we're going to double that number that you just shared after
go
this
leave me
convening.
in comments. Go leave me in comments and train the algorithm.
Amazing. And so back to you, Amar, if I can. Your organization, Rology, started in Egypt. You've now scaled not only to Kenya, but as we were just talking, a whole host of other countries as well. And so I want to know, it's a jump, obviously, on so many different levels. Can you talk a little bit about what has that meant in terms of how have you needed to adjust your data, thinking about the different ways maybe you've practiced or reached with new groups? Can you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, actually, thank you for this question. We started in Egypt because this is the most market we know, and we have been based there, and so on and so forth. But once we reached a good level of maturity from a technology perspective, from an operation perspective, and also from medical operation perspective also as well, we start to think we need to go global even. So we need to start from somewhere. So it was extremely obvious for us that the whole idea has been started from the problem. So it was very obvious to us that we need to follow where is the pain is the most. So we started to build like an Excel sheet, including literally every single country around the globe, and starting to analyze the pain from this country perspective. So it reached up that we have top 20 countries when it comes to where is the pain is the most. So then we started to rank them on another perspective, which is the accessibility from us as a team and where our skill set and all of this stuff, and also where we can do the business better and all of this stuff. And then based on this ranking, we choose to jump into Kenya, and so we built our second office in Nairobi, Kenya, and right now we serve more than 70 hospitals in Kenya, either public and private, starting from Kisii County up to Eldoret, Nairobi also as well, so on and so forth. So the one statement for this, which is we are following where is the pain is the most.
Amazing. And can you just name a few of the other countries? We were talking about them, but just so folks can understand how much you are growing your work at Rology. Where else are you working or looking to scale to?
Yeah, we have an operation in 9 countries nowadays. Egypt, Kenya is our biggest. We have also Saudi Arabia, Zambia, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Libya, Iraq, and Kenya. And we just started like 3 weeks ago in Ghana also as well.
Amazing. And so speaking of scaling, messaging, you have a global following, Gatanjali, of 85,000 young people, I have learned. And I wanted to know, from your perspective, and particularly as you're a student here as well at MIT, how do you see young people engaging with technology and really innovating with it as well in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to address I'm very, very fortunate enough to have so many students who have worked with me and are genuinely interested in the work that I do, but also like the biggest thing that I've learned from every single one of them is everyone has this zeal to learn and a passion to change the world. I've never met someone who says they don't want to change the world, but more importantly, every student that I work with is incredibly different, right? I run innovation workshops through my new foundation that I just established called the Vervient Foundation, which I'm very excited about. Comes from the word verve, which means spirit, energetic, excitement, a lot of which I claim myself to be. But more importantly, I think the real goal behind it was to look at how we're going to establish innovation as a very regular part of early education and curriculum. And I could sit here and do another 20-minute panel about why the current education system needs to go, because it took us years and years and a global pandemic to even consider going online. And I think one big issue, we talked a lot about AI yesterday in this panel as well. I think a little bit of what we need to do is walk before we run. If we look at the state of the world right now, there's this huge disparity amongst people who have access to technology and those who don't. And what we need to focus on is providing internet access, educational resources to those students who have ideas, new, unique perspectives, but don't know where to start and haven't met their potential yet. And that's a little bit about what I'm doing and what I'm trying to kind of get across as well. And so in addition to these workshops, I've had the opportunity to fundraise to start maker spaces in third world countries as well as schools in places in Africa. Some of those countries that you named, some of my favorites are in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. And I think another big thing to mention is again, I was talking about this earlier, but people think and learn very, very differently. A girl that I'm working with in Afghanistan innovates and thinks very, very differently than a little boy in a refugee camp, right? And I think it's important to kind of address and scale solutions and scale like this whole concept of building new ideas, building new solutions, building new creative ways to teach people amongst this entire range of people. And so that's a little bit about why I focus on this common idea of innovation rather than sticking it to technology, right? Focus on this idea of how do we build solutions? How do we come up with cool ideas? Not necessarily always how do we look at the craziest technology that's out there. Because I think, again, we should walk before we run, and I'm kind of excited to see where these students go, because at the end of the day, I hope so many other students from so many other countries end up on this stage just like me, with an equal passion to learn, equal passion to come up with ideas, and probably even better solutions and ways to change the world than I do.
Amazing. Zeal for learning is the buzzword from this for sure. And so I know we're almost out of time. So last question for each of you, please. Yes. And I'll start with you, Amir. What would your advice be to people who are interested in impact-focused technology and innovation?
Okay. So the first thing, to build an impact-driven organization, it doesn't mean to have an impact investment. So you don't need to focus on impact investment, but rather than that, you need to focus on building an impact-driven organization. And I really believe, as an entrepreneur and founder and all of this stuff, that day-to-day operation is the key thing for which can drive your venture and your organization into forward in whatever scenario you want. So to have the impact criteria, the impact directions, cascading until the day-to-day KPIs, I think this is one of the very important secret sauce we need to have. So, as an example, we have in Rology start even when it comes to the sales team even. So usually, for sure, we are in for-profit. So we need to generate revenue for sure. And we have this kind of annual targets, quarterly targets, and so on and so forth, even for the sales team. And this is automatically, it's money, so we need to generate revenue and money and so on. But when it comes to the KPIs for the sales team, we make it over revenue, and also in the same time, how many lives you saved during this month, as an example. So as a salesperson, you will keep track the two things, which is I'm generating revenue, I'm keeping this target, and this is the main KPI, and I have another KPI, which is how many lives I contributed and I helped to save overall. So you can take this kind of impact, which is the impact mandate of the organization, and the cascading up to the day-to-day KPIs into the operation for your team, sales, technology, medical quality, and all of this stuff.
Great. We're at time, but I'm going to still ask you the question quickly. What's your...
And I will answer very quickly.
Thank you.
I think I see the clock, the big red clock. I think the big thing for me when it comes to impact, I think the best solutions start on this concept of empathy. I think we always need to start with the user first. And I think more importantly, like the work that you're doing, it focuses on the user, it focuses on the people. And I think that's really where we need to start. One of the biggest questions I get is, you probably would have made so much money if you already built a startup for the thousands and thousands of ideas that I've come up with. And I think a big part of why I didn't is because, one, I don't want to be locked down to any specific idea. This is time to take risks, time to learn, time to grow, time to fail forward, more importantly. And I think secondly, too, I don't want to lose that sense of impact. Once money is thrown into it, that's a very real possibility, is you lose that sense of impact. And I love the people that I work with. I love being on the front lines, and I think that's what makes me so excited to do what I do, and hopefully that kind of carries around. So I'm excited to see and kind of watch people impact the world in their own ways. Yeah.
Amazing. How about it for our panelists? Thank you both.
Please welcome Smita Sharma, photojournalist and TED Fellow.
The stories might not be very pleasant to see. I must warn you beforehand. This is Pinky, a mother of 2 young daughters who lived in a posh neighborhood in Delhi. Pinky ran a successful business with her partner Radhe and was a friendly face in her community. What you're seeing here is a face of an ordinary woman, a mother, a next-door neighbor. What you wouldn't have imagined is that Pinky was a wanted criminal and a mastermind in the sex trafficking industry in India. I took this image of Pinky from the police records when she was absconding. After months of investigation, the police were finally able to trace and arrest her in 2017. Her partner Radhe was also arrested in the same year. In 2022, both Pinky and Radhe were convicted and sentenced to imprisonment for 7 and 5 years, respectively. I know, the number 7 and 5 sounds too low for such a grave crime. But the criminal justice system in India is extremely slow and has low conviction rates. This was a huge achievement for the authorities, despite the muscle power that criminals often use to threaten and subvert the system. Pinky's story is part of my 8-year project investigating cross-border trafficking of underage girls for sex work and domestic servitude in South Asia. This project was commissioned by National Geographic magazine and was published in October 2020 of the magazine. In 2022, this was published as a photo book, We Cry in Silence. I'm a photojournalist and a visual storyteller, and my job is to report on critical human rights, environmental, and social issues in the global south. You will often find news stories that look like these. The internet is filled with cliched images and numbers. The numbers and statistics are important. It helps us to understand the gravity of the situation, but they take away the faces and the stories behind them. Faces that are like you and me. Stories help us to humanize these problems, and my job is to show them through visual storytelling. A few years ago, I went to the Central African Republic on assignment for Human Rights Watch to document the lives of women who were kept as sex slaves, and where rape was used as a weapon of war. This is Angela with her child. Angela's parents and husband were killed in front of her, and she was captured and taken by the militia. During her captivity, she was raped by multiple militiamen and tortured. The rape continued even after she got pregnant. 9 months later, she was lucky enough to escape and then gave birth to her child. Her relatives rejected her and blamed her for having a child without a father. After her initial hesitance, Angela accepted her child and grew to love him. When this report came out, it embarrassed the local government and helped pay attention to violence against women in the country. While working on another project called Not My Shame, documenting sexual violence in India, I got the news of a young girl being attacked by 3 men. The attempt to gang rape her was a failure because Shama, as we named her, fought back. Unable to bear the humiliation and defeat, the men dragged her into the kitchen and poured kerosene to immolate her. Her mother, who was on the terrace, heard her screams and came running down to find her daughter burned in flames. This is Shama, lying in the burn ward of a government hospital. Her parents allowed me to photograph her and share her story. They wanted the world to see not just her suffering, but how brave she was. Unfortunately, Shama succumbed to her injuries and died a few days later, leaving her family in despair and shock. I know these images are not pleasant to see. So why must we see them? Why should we bear witness to such heinous stories? Because these images and stories matter. They bring us closer to the people and empathize with them. They help to shape our perspectives and help us to emote and understand people's lives. Acknowledgement is the first step to work towards a solution. And empathy is the first step to work towards a resolution. I hope you'll show your empathy towards various people and various issues that we have been speaking about now and also in the future. Thank you.
Please welcome Imara Jones, founder and CEO, TransLash Media. Ayan Kishore, CEO, Benetech. And moderator Danielle Forward, CEO and co-founder, Natives Rising.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Forward, CEO and co-founder of Natives Rising. We economically empower Indigenous people with careers in technology and entrepreneurship, and we're also inspiring the next generation of Indigenous women in STEM with AI workshops and community. And with that said, I'm super excited to talk to these other leaders that are mediating their communities with technology as well. So I'd love to start with Imara. Imara, your tagline at TransLash is telling trans stories to save trans lives. I hope the audience is aware of how much both misrepresentation and direct hate show up online and in person. What does TransLash focus on as an antidote or alternative, and how do you change the conversation?
I think we say that because it's a fact that trans people and trans communities are roughly just around 1% of the population on a good day. And what's fascinating is that if you look at the political conversation about trans people, the cultural conversation about trans people, the education conversation around trans people, you would think that trans people were 80% of the population. There's an outsized obsession that's just not matched by the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons why is because so much of the fear of the unknown that comes at a time of tremendous technological change needs to find an expression for people. And so many people have directed that anxiety about a great many things, the use of technology to make kids trans, which is absurd, and all these other things, onto this small group of people. And the smallness actually counterintuitively drives the obsession. And it drives the obsession because 2 out of 3 Americans, because of the small numbers, say that they don't personally know someone who's trans. And so within the gap between what people know and what they think is where ignorance comes in, and is the space that's filled by fear and by hate. And we know from the past that whether we like it or not, the bottom line is that most stories about trans people, given the history of trans people in the United States and elsewhere, those stories are transphobic. And so that means that in the absence of knowledge, in the absence of language, in the absence of reality, what gets filled in those gaps at this time of anxiety are these transphobic stories that amplify these other fears. So what that means is that we have to find other ways, we have to find other technologies, quite frankly, of bridging that gap. And that's where storytelling comes in. Because in order to know your story, given the range of media that we now have, I don't have to personally know you, right? I just have to be able to personally access your story. And therefore, that means that what is an anecdote to the ignorance, what is an anecdote to the fear, what can be a force multiplier in terms of knowing us and connecting us are stories, and stories that we tell by using technology.
Gosh, that's such a beautiful statement, and in the Indigenous community also representing a very small number at times.
That's right.
I have found a lot of solidarity and inspiration from the trans community as well, being the only one that they know that's Indigenous, or they don't know anyone that's Indigenous, and yeah, storytelling has been so profound, and I'd love to learn more from you on that.
And there's so many people who are Indigenous and trans.
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. Such an even smaller number. Ayan, Benetech provides learning content for a broad spectrum of people, particularly those with disabilities. Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, sure. So, I think it's best to start here by imagining if you're a student at MIT. You all don't need to imagine that. And say you have a disability, right? So say you have severe low vision, or you have neurodivergence, such as dyslexia. And the way you could read is by being able to hear content, or be able to manipulate the text of the content to have it in large font, etc. Right? So if you're in a class, say you're in a psychology class, or that amazing professor from the media lab in their class, and they assigned you a reading in a textbook, your peers are going to be able to go buy the book at the bookstore or go get a library and get the book. But if you're a student with a disability, to be able to consume that, maybe the first place you turn to is your disability support office, right? And you go there, and they will try to go get the digital book of it and convert it into an accessible format. If you can't find a digital book, they have to literally buy the book and scan it page by page. And it's been a week, and your class is back up, and you've not had a chance to read. Your learning is basically averted. There's social and emotional impact of not being able to participate in class discussions and so on and so forth. So luckily, what we are trying to do is sort of prevent the inaccessibility of content being a barrier for learning. So, and we realize that disability is a spectrum. So for different learners and different reasons, truly all of us have learning differences. But being able to take a book and be available at the time you need it, along with your peers, is what we try to solve. So right now, in fact, if you go to the Disability Support Office, one of the services they will actually recommend you to is Bookshare, which is our platform. So you can go into Bookshare. You're highly likely to find the book. In fact, it's the largest one in the world. You have 1.3 million books there that you can basically hear the content. You can convert it into refreshable braille. You can put it in a large font.
Wow.
And all of those supports actually allow you to consume it at the same time. So that's perhaps the biggest way we're trying to help remove the barrier of accessibility in learning.
That's incredible. Wow. So on the communities that each of you both have built. I'm curious, Imara, can you talk about the community that's developed as TransLash has expanded its work, and how has technology enabled the trans community to come together so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that given the fact that trans people are such a small part of the population, it is easy for trans people outside of some urban cores to be isolated from themselves and each other. If you live in rural America, for example, that's a really good example. Or if you live on a reservation, which we had someone reach out to us about. So I think that one of the things that technology does is that it allows for the formation of community. So it doesn't only serve this purpose, as I said before, of talking to the rest of the country in this case. It allows for trans people to be able to network and to form community and to not be isolated. And we know that there are very real health impacts from feeling a sense of community, right? Not only in terms of mental health, but physical health, sense of well-being. So there are all these really important things that we have about forming community, and I think that social media in particular has been a really powerful tool for trans people, I would say over the last 10 years. And that's why some of the closing of those platforms through various rules and making them more of a walled garden that are opaque has a disproportionate impact on communities. And it's also one of the things that we have to think about as we move forward with AI. It's one of the things that we're beginning to think about as an organization, which is, how can a technology that basically works off of large data sets as its ability to be able to form and be effective, how, when you have such a small group of people where there is not a lot of data, and where a lot of the data and the stories and the language that are used are, quite frankly, toxic, what is the best way to make sure that that technology doesn't become weaponized, doesn't become an impediment towards some of the things that we're talking about?
Absolutely. Ayan, how is the disability community part of Benetech's planning and management? And how has designing for disability made better products for other learners?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, I mean, I'm privileged to get to serve this community, right? And any of us in the position that, we get to represent a community, we've got to make sure that the community is involved in everything from decision making to building the products, right from the top to the bottom, to the front line. So in our case, from our board to our management to our people managers to those who are out there in the schools, they're either people with disabilities themselves, or they're caregivers, parents of those with disabilities, or oftentimes teachers. So for us that's important and it's particularly important since disability is a broad spectrum, to have these voices in the decision making. But I think it doesn't really stop there, right? To me, I mean, the question is, and we're at Solve today, I think who is the solver is a really pretty important question, right? And I think if we're privileged enough to solve for other people, they need to be, part of the solution. So, we've, thinking ahead, we have been thinking about how do we get, those with disabilities empowered to be solvers, to be the entrepreneurs of the future, to be those building the technology solutions like AI solutions, so that the solutions that are then created for everybody have less bias, right? So, to us, it's going beyond just thinking of inclusion in our own, sort of operations, to really putting that in the programmatic work that we do. And so one of the areas that I am really excited about that we've been doing is, trying to really nurture, and you mentioned that you've been working on STEM for Indigenous learners and people. For me, this is the same thing with the disabilities, right? We have a huge issue in that those with disabilities do not learn STEM subjects beyond a certain age, but generally in middle school. And as STEM jobs grow in the future, the chances of employment is reducing for those with disabilities. So we're trying to stem that inequity by really working on AI solutions to be able to make STEM content accessible. And we're thankful, you heard from the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. They, along with General Motors, have basically allowed us to build solutions so you can take math content, you can take chemistry content, and suddenly images like graphs or equations become accessible output. So, and the great thing is an accessible book is not just helpful for those who have disabilities, right? Like I was saying, everybody has a learning difference. Sometimes, I just like to hear, and that's how I consume sometimes much better. In fact, and there's so much data and science around, the fact that if you're able to have ability to manipulate typography, which as a designer at some point I was like, no, I like the way things are designed, but providing that into the hands of learners and consumers, we find actually the largest gains are those who are the most prolific readers actually by able to manipulate typography. It helps them. So these are not only those with disabilities. So those sorts of accommodations help everybody. And then I think more broadly, inclusion. And inclusive design helps everybody, right? An inclusive classroom is not just helpful for those with disabilities, it actually helps others. If you are designing a product that is, designing for the extremes, these are not edge cases. If you build your product to be more universally designed, you are actually creating a better product. And I think that's what excites me every day, the work we do in designing these solutions. And I think I put that out as a challenge for everyone, is when you are designing, try to make your product as universal as possible.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I love that we can both share the background in product design. One of my favorite pieces of inspiration when designing for differently abled communities is your classic dip in the sidewalk, so that the wheelchairs can go down the sidewalk to cross the street.
Yeah.
And you'll see all these moms and dads with their strollers using it, or unhoused folks with shopping carts. And all these new use cases start emerging that maybe the people that originally designed the sidewalk didn't anticipate, but it's just one strong example of designing for differently abled folks and how a lot of people might actually benefit from the same design.
Exactly.
This is a question for both of you. We can start with Imara. How do new technologies help you meet your goals? Whether that's enabling your community to do something or mitigating a risk or opportunity.
I think that for us, the more that we can reach people in a faster way, it's just better, like when you're in media and when you can tell stories. So I think that we're always looking for technology that will allow us to do that. And that's kind of I'd say the North Star for us that's really, really, really important. At the same time, one of the things that, we saw this in an earlier piece, that you don't want to become overly reliant on certain forms of technology. One, because over-reliance on anything always creates a vulnerability. It just does. And secondly, with regards to new tools that are being developing, over-reliance actually could make it harder for us to use judgment, cognitive discernment, other things that are really important within a journalist organization, right? They can't be a stand-in for those things. And so I think that that's the balance that we constantly are working on and we're thinking about. The other thing that happens is technology is a wave that never stands still. So what we were doing, how we were doing it a year or two ago will change, especially with regards to some of the things that we're talking about. How we engage and use AI a year from now is going to be totally different than 3 years from now. It's going to be totally different than 5 years from now. And that's also why we're very cognizant of making sure that we try to cover as many forms of technology, legacy forms of technology, and new forms of technology as possible in order to be able to reach the most people that we can, and also as a hedge against the instability of the newly emergent things. I really fear for people who become over-reliant on new forms of anything, because that can set up a vulnerability. If you were the company that's putting them forth, no, that's a huge opportunity. But as a user, as consumers, as people who are using these tools, I think we have to use a lot of judgment.
Thank you. And Ayan, what would be your response? And I can read the question again.
No, it's good. Look, so there are some real risks when it comes to new technologies, and I'm going to zoom into AI. Particularly for marginalized communities, underserved communities, and that's why we're having this conversation, right? So the way those with disabilities are portrayed, those with disabilities use, for example, in a classroom today, students with disabilities are using ChatGPT and LLMs much more than their peers, but they're more at risk of actually having their data compromised and what that really might mean. They're more at risk of being disciplined. So there's some real challenges, right, we have with it, but the opportunities are immense. And I tend to be an optimistic, but have a good, healthy dose of pessimism. AI is literally changing today what technology, how we can enable those with disabilities, right? Like what glasses did for me as low vision so that I can live in this, and be having a complete meaningful existence without even thinking about what would have been a physical impediment for me is what I think AI and digital tools are doing, right? So you can pick up your phone and point it at something and it will tell you what it is, right? Thanks to LLMs, right? In learning, you're able to get more personalized content, and for us, we are looking at how do you take a reading material and make it at the instantaneously at the appropriate reading level and reading style for a learner, right? And what that might do for those with learning differences. I think that text to speech and speech to text, which a lot of us just rely on, now those are sound very much human-like, which is huge because that used to be a huge barrier for consuming content, particularly for younger learners. There are some challenges, like we read in the news today about whose voices they are and all of that, and those do need to be solved, right? But so I think I'm really optimistic. I think this is a watershed moment. I think we need to appropriately and ethically move those solutions to actually serve the communities and have those with the communities involved in sort of designing those solutions. And from Benetech's standpoint, we are on this mission to use AI to eradicate inaccessibility, and I think that's what is exciting to us. So all of you should really be thinking about how do we use these tools and technologies in a way that is meaningful for the communities we serve, and there is immense opportunity.
Thank you both so much. Both of you are so inspiring, and I could talk to you forever, which is probably why we're a little bit over time, because I'm so interested in the work that you do. Thank you both seriously for everything you do for your communities, Imara and Ayan.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please welcome Devshi Mehrotra, CEO, Justice Text.
In 2015, I left my hometown to attend school in Chicago. As I settled in, I grew to fall in love with the city, its history, and its people. But as I soon came to realize, Chicago is a rather complicated place. It's a city in which a 17-year-old, unarmed, Black American boy by the name of Laquan McDonald was shot 16 times by a local police officer. That officer only received 7 years as punishment. But without the dashcam footage of the incident, there likely would have been no accountability at all. More and more police interactions are being caught on camera than ever before. Well over 50% of law enforcement agencies have already rolled out body cams, and the typical police department captures tens of thousands of hours of footage per year. As a society, we've invested over $100 million in rolling out this technology. But we failed to ask the question, how does that actually lead to greater accountability? What most people don't realize is that the current system to analyze this data is broken. A South Dakota public defender recently said that there was no way physically possible for him to review the sheer volume of footage he receives in his cases. But reviewing this data is critical because it reveals information often not captured in official police reports. It reveals information that could redirect people's lives before they experience the harms of incarceration. Hi, my name is Devshi. I'm the founder of Justice Text and an MIT anti-racist technology solver. During my senior year in college, I reached out to my local public defenders and told them I wanted to try and make a difference. Public defenders serve over 80% of all criminal defendants in this country, but they are systemically underfunded, understaffed, and underestimated. We knew we could change that. We started building powerful AI technology that takes thousands of hours of criminal discovery and distills that down into critical insights for these attorneys. Our software transcribes this footage and leverages machine learning to automatically generate a timeline of key events. As an attorney, I can now jump to the exact moment my client was Mirandized, administered a field sobriety test, or placed under arrest. Public defenders also use justice text to decode a wide array of proprietary file formats, often created by monopolistic jail call providers and body cam manufacturers. We started as a small school project, and today we're serving over 50 public defender agencies in major cities like Portland, Houston, and DC. 2 years ago, right here at Solve, I was introduced to the leadership at the Massachusetts Public Defender's Office. Our initial pilot with them yielded 50% in time savings for their attorneys, and today I'm so proud to share that we'll be rolling out justice text to every single public defender across the state. Thank you. Since the start of last year, we've processed over 30,000 hours of footage on our platform, which have been used to dismiss charges and reduce sentences for countless defendants. Here's one example. Earlier this year, the MIT Technology Review wrote a feature story on an attorney who used justice text to uncover evidence of serious police misconduct buried under hours of body cam footage. Upon reviewing the evidence, the county judge not only dismissed the case outright, but she actually ruled that the local police department's body cam policy was unconstitutional. This is what true accountability looks like. At Justice Text, we're a highly technical, highly diverse team that brings engineering experience from organizations like Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. We built Justice Text hand in hand with public defenders from the very start, and we hope you'll join us in scaling this work. Thank you.
And now, please welcome back to the stage Hala Hanna, Executive Director, MIT Solved.
Oh, that was amazing. I love listening to that. Thank you, Devshi. And I do want to give a shout out to Smita. I think there's so much tragedy that is streaming through our phones today that it's understandable to want to look away. And I really appreciate Smita's reminder about why it's important to bear witness. All right, this was a great dive into AI, into all the ways that technology can serve us better as communities, as people, as wanting to get better as society. So thank you for all of that.